What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. The Chicago Bulls are still a shit show, and they are in all likelihood going to blow things up this year. So I want to talk about it first from the perspective of what you've been hearing within the Lakers and what your sense is on the direction they're leaning. And then I want you and I to talk about which Chicago Bulls players we think the Lakers should target. But let's start with the Lakers and what you've heard and what your sense of the situation is. What is their read on Chicago and who they prefer in that specific situation?
Yeah, well, in conversations I've had in recent weeks regarding the Bulls, there is real interest in Zach LaVine, but I think it comes at the right price, right? So if you look at his contract, he's owed, put aside the $40 million that he's making this year, but it's about $130 plus million over the next 3 years. He's got like a 50 something $million player option that I think he's going to pick up in 2026, 27. So they're looking at it like, if we're investing in this, like this is kind of a negative contract, right? So we don't want to give up too much in terms of, our depth and draft capital, and they are limited, of course, in when they can give up certain players. And then on top of that, they don't have much draft capital to include anyway. So I've actually heard that they're more interested in DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso. That was something I reported a couple of weeks ago. And I mean, AC, he's the one that got away. Laker fans it still bothers them inside the organization. It's still a very divisive topic in terms of his departure and why that happened and who's to blame. And it's just kind of a thorny situation still. And then DeMar is someone that the Lakers have courted for several years now, dating back to, originally Toronto and then San Antonio and now in Chicago. So also, both of those guys are on more manageable contracts. Alex has a partial guarantee for next season. DeMar is an expiring contract. So you look at DeMar comes in, he's that over-the-top shot maker that the team seemingly doesn't really have outside of when LeBron's jumper is falling. I think he's someone that could be a crunch time option for them and kind of balance out LeBron's pick and roll attacks. And then Alex Caruso, one of the best point of attack defenders in the league, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, period. So we've seen the success he's had next to LeBron and AD in a Lakers jersey. So I think both of those guys make more sense within what the Lakers need. I think with Zach, you could see the fit there as the third guy. I think the Lakers haven't had that third reliable offensive option, this season. I think Austin has grown into that more recently, and that was what we were expecting from game one. But with the struggles of that starting group, them moving Austin to the bench, I think they've kind of needed that third guy. And I think Austin could do it, but whether you get Zach, whether you get DeMar, whether you get someone else, I do think they could use a boost offensively. So I think there's real interest in all three guys, but from what I've been told, DeMar and Alex are higher on their priority list.
I'm glad to hear you say that because, here's the thing. In a vacuum, I lean Zach for a couple of reasons. One, LeBron's going to have the ball at the end of a lot of these games and in big moments. And I think about the 2-man game stuff that Austin and LeBron have had so much success with, like ghost screens and slipping out of it. They did a lot of that in the playoffs last year too. I imagine Zach is kind of a more high-powered offensive version of that type of game, and Austin's so good off the ball that can work great. Also DeMar DeRozan as a over-the-top shot maker. Like last year, he made about 47% of his pull-up jump shots, which even though he only takes long twos, that's still pretty good. And but this year his pull-up shooting is way down. And so I just look at Zach's playing at a level that's a little bit higher than where DeMar is right now. I do like DeMar as a passer better, and then on ball, I think he just in general is a better half-court shot creator than Zach is. But off the ball and playing off of LeBron specifically, I like Zach as a fit better. But the contract stuff that you mentioned is super important. Like, you can imagine a scenario where you bring in DeMar and then you retain him on a team-friendly deal because you have his bird rights, and you can bring him back at $20 million million for 4 years or something like that after the season. Like, you have flexibility by bringing in his salary as an expiring in a way that helps you maintain the ability to build around Anthony Davis into the future. So I just think, like, at the end of the day, you bank on a guy like DeMar, this initial, month or so of the season being kind of fluky and him getting his shot back and kind of figuring things out. And then that just being a better option for you down the line. The Alex Caruso piece, I think, I don't think it necessarily has to be Alex, but he's the type of player they need, which is like an excellent two-way off-ball player that can take primary point of attack assignments, can play off of LeBron as a cutter and as a shooter, and just in general is that like high motor athlete that we've been talking about so much. That said, the problem with Alex specifically is, like, you think of him as a 2 next to Austin. And we've already seen kind of with Torian at the 3, it looks a little small. It looks a little bit like they struggle rebounding in those situations. Jared in there fixes a lot of the defense and rebound situations, but then you have the offensive questions surrounding him. And so a lot of times I kind of lean more towards looking for a bigger 3-and-D wing, because then you can put Torian at the 2 where he's actually been more successful this season. And so in a weird way, like, when it comes to the Bulls' potential packages, all 3 of those players kind of have a big kind of like question mark. Zach's contract and his knee, DeMar's kind of shooting this season and whatever it would cost to retain him, and then Alex and just whether or not that's exactly the type of player they should be looking at or not. Like, so it's complicated, and that just kind of leads me to where, if it's the right deal and you don't have to overspend and it makes sense in terms of the salaries, you do it, but you don't overpay for any of those guys. I would look at that as more of a trade of opportunity rather than a trade of aggression, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the direction I look with the Bulls. And then I do think, though, that, and you and I have said this in both of the shows we've done already, and I'm sure you still agree, which is, I do think this team eventually does need to make some sort of trade. I think that has been kind of like, one of the safest bets in this NBA season the minute they re-signed D'Angelo Russell. And I think that's kind of the direction we're going. Would you agree in that sense still?
Yeah, I think so. Especially with, I'm sure we'll get into the Philly loss and, LeBron saying they need to make a lot of changes. I think something's coming down the road.